and it was about 8 hours after the attack that I was finally allowed to shower and get him off me. It turned out that I had a laceration from forced entry and things like that. There was no marks from the knife, because if he had you know, had enough force to mark me with the knife, then it would have cut me. I had one bruise in my body, and that was it. I had a really sore head, which I kept saying to the woman, he's hurt my head, I have this massive lump on my head and I have a banging headache. Oh, it's just from you crying, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And I kept saying to her, I've got a lump on my head. And she never checked it over, never put it in her notes, never done any of that. And that stood ground in court. My police officer took me to Burger King after, because it was really late that night and I hadn't eaten anything all day. You know, and he'd wait outside for me when I went in and got my food and ate it on the way home. And he didn't say much to me, but he said enough. After that day I had to go a couple of days later and to do a video interview of what happened again in detail. It just kept bringing it up. I kept seeing his face. I kept having these night terrors. I'd go home and I'd lock myself in my flat, the chain, the Yale, Chubb, everything locked. Check all the windows, lock the windows. And I lived in a close, so any cars coming in, I was shaking and I was panicking. I knew he was in prison, but I still had that fear. My family view me as someone so strong, someone that doesn't let anything affect them, and I wasn't allowed to hurt. I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to be affected, because I was Sarah, I was the strong one, it's Sarah, it's not anyone else, it's Sarah, she's fine. And all I wanted to do was just cry. So I agreed to go to this therapist and talk to her. She helped me with my night terrors. It was the first time the Metropolitan Police were using this Women's and Girls, I think it's called the Women's and Girls Network or Women and Girls Group, and it was the first time they were using them, so I was a bit of a guinea pig for that. But I explained to her at night time I'd wake, I'd have these dreams that he was coming back to the flat and he was trying to get in, and he'd be trying to get in through the door, and you know, he'd be trying to just do it all over again. And she explained to me that these night terrors are something that you go through for your brain to try and figure out what's just happened to you when you've been through a traumatic event, and not to think of them as another nightmare, to think of it as one out the way, one step closer to your brain figuring out what's happened to you, why you've just been through what you've been through, what you could have done to prevent it, and what you could have done, you know, to escape it. And she said it's just your brain's way of coping. She said it's not you, It's your subconscious. Every time you sleep, it will kick in. And you will have these night terrors. And they will stop. They will get less. And they will stop. And she said, so think of it as one out the way and not another one. Which helped me a lot. Because that's the way I viewed them from then on. Rather than letting them get to me, it was more, I saw them more as a triumph. Another one done. I'm one step closer to being over it. But she'd sit and she'd listen to me, let me talk. I'd tell her about all the abuse, all of the verbal, physical, mental abuse. I told her how sometimes I felt he was making me crack up inside, and I couldn't see the purpose of carrying on. I couldn't see where my life was going. She gave me this exercise to do where I'd close my eyes, I'd picture a basket with a balloon attached to it, and everything he did to me, everything he said, everything I held, all the memories, even the good ones, she said, put them all in the basket. Picture yourself putting all these memories, all of these things in this basket. And she said, and let the basket go and watch it float. Watch it float away with all of them bad things inside it. Strangely enough, it felt like a big load off. It felt like a, and it made me cry, putting all these things in there, all these good memories, bad memories, everything that belonged to him, putting them in there and just watching them float and go. And then our sessions became less and less about what had happened to me and more about what I was going to do, how I was going to change my life, how I'm going to better myself, how I'm not going to let this affect me. She'd signed me off, was not needing any more help, but she wanted to see me after the court case, and she wanted to see how I cope after, whatever the outcome. There was a 96% chance that he would walk free. 96% of domestic rapists walk free. Those figures alone scared the hell out of me. This man had been abusing me for the whole time I'd known him. And I thought, finally, he's done something enough for him to finally be punished, for him to finally get what was coming to him. Karma was coming back around. He'd finally screwed up. And they held him in prison from the day he was arrested. The night that they held him, he'd headbutted the wall until he cut his head open, and he wrote Merry Christmas in his own blood on the wall. When the police told me, I laughed. Because I could see him doing it. I could see it. And I asked them if he'd get help. I knew he needed help, and I asked him if he'd get it. They said to me that they weren't going to bother trying him as you know, insane. They wanted to try him as sane. They wanted him to go sane. They didn't want him to have an excuse for what he did to me. They didn't want to put it down to mental health. They wanted to give him what was coming to him, what he was due, and for him to get the maximum he could. They'd been held in prison, and I had my first court case in May. I went there and I didn't know what to expect, really. I was a bit here nor there, really. I went in and you see all these things on TV that, you know, the defence barrister was ripping into these girls and, you know, saying it's your fault, you asked for it. I was expecting all of that to come my way, but I didn't get any of it. And I remember sitting there in the box. I'd given my statement, I told them what happened to me, I bawled my eyes out. I couldn't even get through the first line of what my name was and swearing on the oath without breaking down. But I chose to go in there, no curtains, no nothing. I wanted to look him square in the face and show them I was not ashamed. I had nothing to hide, and I wasn't afraid to look at him and tell him and everybody else what he'd done to me. I had nothing to hide. And I stood up there, and I remember this woman in the jury, and she has had this attitude on her. I'd seen her in the lobby before going up, and she was giving everyone attitude, telling them to fuck off and all of this stuff. And I thought, oh, what a charming woman. I didn't realise she was going to be on my jury, yet alone the head juror. And she looked at me and I could tell she didn't want to believe me. I could tell she had no interest in it at all. And it came down to the whole racial thing. I could tell that she thought I was just another white girl trying to frame a black man. And that's what you face from other black women that have that mentality, have that narrow-mindedness of it's because he's black. She would roll her eyes. You could see she wasn't interested. How she didn't, you know, be held in contempt for some of the things she was doing, I do not know.